So the first thing I want to do is introduce myself. I am the newest president to the Coalition for Canadian Police Excellence, formerly the Coalition for Canadian Police Reform. The name change, we believe, reflects better our mandate on creating a professional, effective policing institutions in our country. So on behalf of the coalition, welcome everybody to a continuing episode of a series of webinars that we host where we share information, provide opportunities for discussion, all with the interest of advancing policing in Canada. I want to start the presentation today by acknowledging the land that we are on, having the indigenous presence. We acknowledge that we are on traditional territories of the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries, an important step in reconciling and acknowledging the importance of our traditional lands. So today's webinar is an opportunity to discuss the health and well-being of members who serve our communities. I think it has application for literally any first responder, but because we're a coalition looking at police excellence, we will be focusing on police officers. It is self-evident that a healthy, well-adjusted police member will be a more effective public servant. Today, we have two speakers who will discuss approaches to helping members not only cope, but thrive in the workplace and better serve our communities. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our two speakers today. And I'm going to read both of their bios at the same time, because I think it's an opportunity then for the audience to understand who both speakers are. And in the interest of efficiency, we can move directly into the presentations and actually have an interactive and conversational experience. So it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Vincent, PhD. Dr. Vincent is an 18-year retired police veteran with frontline investigative community policing experience, and she is the founder and lead director of the Haven Mental Health Wellness. With a PhD in forensic psychology, specializing in crisis response, Michelle has dedicated her life to supporting public safety personnel, military members, and their families. Through the Haven, she creates safe, peer-led spaces where individuals can reconnect, build resilience, and access meaningful tools for navigating occupational stress and life's challenges. Michelle is deeply committed to ensuring that those who serve others make up feeling connected, anchored, and empowered, with the tools and resources to overcome daily challenges. Known for her collaborative leadership style, Michelle brings people and ideas together to create innovative, practical programming that meets individuals where they are. She delivers webinars and talks globally, sharing her passion for connection, partnership, and the belief that lasting change happens when we come together. Her guiding philosophy is simple: together we can. We're also privileged to have a member of the Niagara Region Police Service, Ms. Sandy Staniforth. Sandy is currently a superintendent with the Niagara Region Police Service, where she has worked for over 30 years, counting down the days to her pending retirement. Well, congratulations, Sandy, on an interesting and bright future. Sandy has worked in frontline roles, street crime, training, recruiting, professional standards, and importantly, member support. As an inspector, Sandy spent time in the duty office as well as a district commander before being promoted to superintendent, where she oversaw executive services, courts, and operational support. She started the member support unit and built peer support teams. Chaplaincy teams took on the first facility dog and brought a facility dog. I'd like to hear more about that. And brought the reintegration program to Niagara region and continued to assist other services across Ontario in doing the same. She was part of the hiring of the service's first psychologist and collaborated with the service psychologist in continuing to build the unit and support the membership. Sandy is an avid hockey player, playing through university and continuing with a local senior team that she now coaches. She was the assistant coach of the Brock University women's hockey team for 15 years. So she obviously has leadership, passion, and commitment well beyond the professional environment. Sandy spends her time away from work with family, including 2 golden retrievers, playing pickleball, time at the cottage, surrounded by boating activities, or just relaxing. A nice example of work-life balance. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the speakers, and I invite Michelle to start off the session.
Actually, if you're okay with this, Mike, we had arranged for Sandy to start off. Is that all right?
Then,
sorry, we switched it up on you.
Okay, so adaptability is my hallmark. Sandy,
know,
please
right?
proceed.
Thanks, and thanks for that introduction, Mike. It definitely makes me sound old when I think back to the time that I had for 15 years of coaching hockey, and where did I get that time? Anyways, Michelle and I have taken a little bit of a different approach than the general wellness webinars that you may have experienced in the past. We both appreciate that most police services or enforcement organizations have now embedded some sort of wellness program and some sort of reactive response to critical incidents or trauma. So what we wanted to look at is basically taking an officer from day one and how they come in and how we can embed both the physical and psychological wellness into them so they can go from not just survival, but from striving. So we're going to have a little bit of back and forth here, banter, and Michelle and I definitely have different experiences, and but we both share the utmost passion about keeping our people safe and well for the longer life. So I'm going to start with basically, Michelle, so when we talk about our officers coming into policing, they basically go through an application process where cognitive, they have to demonstrate their skills, they have to come in physically fit, they pass the psychological test, and they're usually full of confidence. So once they get hired, we basically send them off for training, and that training all involves fundamental skill sets. We're shaping their identity, but they're human first, and we seem to forget that along the training timeline. They have lived experience, they have a central nervous system, they have strengths, vulnerabilities, characters, and relationship. They come in totally prepared for everything. And I would suggest, and not being critical, that we focus as a law professional organization on the tactical development of our people, and we lack in the personal development. We create imbalance right from the beginning. So just wondering, Michelle, what do you think of that, and maybe some ideas?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Sandy. And first of all, thanks as well, Mike, for the introduction. I really appreciate that. And yes, that's exactly what we do. And I mean, this is what we've been doing for decades, generations of policing. And where I think we can really make changes is understanding and education right from the beginning. And I would even suggest, I know we started with like as recruits, but I would even suggest before becoming recruits, maybe even people who are interested in becoming candidates for the application process, because the tools and work that we've come up with, or that we've collaborated with many brilliant minds, are really applicable to everybody, all of us, right? And our families. And so I would suggest that even from the, prior to even getting on the job in colleges and universities, when they're experiencing programming and they're interested in policing or any first responder profession, to consider the following pieces. And I also would like to sort of bring attention to, it's not just individuals, it's also organizations, right? And so, yes, we have to begin at the individual level, And yet we want to remember that it's the organization is comprised of our individuals, and often our our senior leaders really is where this sort of training, if you want to call it that, might want to begin. So I would suggest safety would be the first piece. And Simon Sinek, in his, I'm going to be referring to different resources, just in case you're interested in doing a bit of a deeper dive. Simon Sinek, in his book called The Infinite Game, which is a brilliant read for any leader. And I'm going to preface that each and every one of us are leaders, regardless of the roles that we play. Simon Sinek talks deeply about the circle of safety. And I've always found that to be very powerful and very important. And the only way that we can, and we'll do a bit of a deeper dive, but I'm just going to skim over it to begin with. In order for us to be able to hear other people, to have effective communication at any level, we must feel safe, or we will miss out on integral pieces in that communication. And of course, policing really is probably the highest form of communication needed out there. So understanding what our circle of safety looks like is absolutely key. So we have three lenses that we believe are important in a healthy, long-living organization and police officer and or civilian, public safety personnel. So safety is the first one. Physiology. The second one is physiology, because everything we have going on from a mental health perspective is absolutely always based in physiology first, okay? Everything, every thought that you have, everything that's going on is all physiologically impacted in some way. And having an understanding of how our physiology works so that we can, first of all, understand ourselves, because it always begins with us first, and then understand and support those around us in understanding themselves. And then the third lens is sustainability. And really, one of the things that I've noticed, I know when I was policing, is that, and this is where Simon Sinek's book is really brilliant, is that policing organizations especially often play an infinite game with a finite mindset. Now, an infinite game is, okay, we'll describe a finite game first. A finite game, known players, right? Known rules. It's like a hockey game. When you think of a hockey game, you've got two teams with a number of people that come out and play. If somebody does something that's not correct, a penalty is instilled. And at the end of the game, there's a winner and there's a loser. Well, infinite games are just as they sound. They don't end. They don't have a beginning and an end. They may seem to, but they really don't. Policing's been around forever. So even if an organization is new, it's still an infinite game, right? There are no winners and losers, okay? And yes, there might be rules, like as in our procedures and our policies, but at the end of the day, there is no sort of referee that's going to watch every move that you're making and make those decisions at that time. There are a lot more components to this, but this is just giving you an idea. And in order to make sure that an organization is sustainable, we have to make sure that we're playing with the right mindset. And that is the mindset of the infinite game, so the infinite mindset. And we'll go into that a little bit more deeply. But those are the three lenses. So we have safety, physiology, and sustainability.
Thanks for that, Michelle. And I think it's really important to understand too that people can appreciate there's a different culture in policing. And a lot of that culture right now is also about change and adapting to new generations, new demands from the community and whatnot. The culture of your leadership definitely changes the safety of the people in that communication phase. And when it comes to mental health, and I would even suggest physical health as well, it's very much protected. It's very much private and confidential, unless people are provided a safe place to share and feel accepted in that sharing. And I think that's the switch in culture that I know I've started to see throughout my career. I hope it only continues to improve, but it really starts with leadership. And if your leaders aren't educated in not only the physiology, but keeping those people healthy, back to being a recruit and coming in even before that, right, is understanding yourself, understanding what drives your body, understanding what reactions your body can have. If you don't set those things in place early on, that too impacts culture. Because if you go to make a shift to it, people are going to wonder what's going on. And I'll give you a prime example, and I've chatted to Michelle about this. A few years ago, actually, I was just entering my member support years, and we had a sergeant that was previously in our emergency services, so the TAC guys with all the big guns, and everybody wants to be cool. So he transferred back to uniform, and he was a sergeant on a shift, and everybody was really happy to get him because they knew there was a lot of confidence in high-risk situations coming back to the shift. But week one, he started out with his briefings, and he said to the shift, I want everybody to practice breathing with me. And I can tell you day one, most of those people that were sitting in that briefing walked away saying, what is going on? By the end of, I believe it was about week 2, everybody was into the breathing. They did it at the briefing in the morning, but then they started to apply it when they were out in the field, when they were going to a high stress call, when they were going to the unknowns and the 911s. And the culture that shifted within that shift, and them just sharing about how these different things you can do for yourself and your physiology was amazing. And that's what I say, culture shift. And it started with a leader, and it started from somebody that was respected from an ETU standpoint. So, but maybe looked at a bit differently and engaging in that sort of practice. But the leadership drove that shift. And when they responded to high risk incidents, they were prepared. They thought things through. There was no impulsive pieces, whether that sergeant was there or not. It was an amazing transition to watch.
Thank you so much for that, Sandy. And that's what an incredible example to me of a committed, caring, responsible, first of all, supervisor, leader, right? And then so wonderful that the organization supported that person. I shouldn't say that because I don't know how it, if it flourished throughout the organization. Yeah, there you go. Such an important piece and key piece. And you bring up the really great point of understanding that our physiology is foundational, right? It's a foundational piece. And when we have leaders like this sergeant that you were mentioning, it's incredibly impactful to see somebody like that suggest something that might feel a little different, right? And it's okay if it feels a little different. We don't like that as police officers, but it's okay, right? And when we normalize physiology, which is really what you talked about there, Sandy, we can do this through education, right? And ensuring that when we're training our leaders as they get promoted, again, I think it should start at the candidate level. Like, people should be coming into their interviews. And in those interviews, I worked recruiting as well, so you'll understand this piece. But when they're in for their interviews, personally, I want to hear that they've done some of this self-work, this internal work, right? Because that tells me that, number one, they care, they have an understanding, they have some, the emotional intelligence to be able to do this job, and they're going to be open to those practices. And I think just understanding where that education can come from, what it can look like, and then making sure that our people have that education. So from a physiological perspective, right, when we think about, there's another great book. Again, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I apologize with these resources. It's called The Biology of Trauma by Dr. Amy Apigian, and it's absolutely a phenomenal read on trauma. It's just incredible. And it really gives us an understanding that, it's throughout our lives from before we were even born. And I don't need to go into it, but it's just understanding that that when I talked about the circle of safety, this is key. And it's interesting because I just, again, the organization that I founded and a part of, it's The Haven. And we just had a cohort of Toronto Police superintendents that came and worked with us. And it was so fascinating for all of us together to come up with specifics on what our circle of safety looks like. And then to understand that it's a fluid process. One of the things I notice when we are either being educated or we are educating or training, I notice that we tell people what to do, but we don't have them commit to the specifics and have those actionable pieces experienced. And so that, I think, is a bit of a gap in the training that we have. And so I would suggest my first thing would be, let's if I were leading a platoon, there are a few things that I would do. From the circle of safety piece, I would have my folks write out. I want every day, every time we meet, we're going to come up with one more thing on our private list that looks like for us as a piece of our circle of safety. What makes me feel safe from a physiological perspective in that moment or in this experience, or however they want to write it out, so that they have this ongoing list, right? Again, when you write it from the brain out through the hand, it really is much reinforced in a greater way. And then the other piece to that is, I'm not sure if you're all familiar with HeartMath, but another incredibly powerful resource. They have free information on their charitable side, on their nonprofit side, and then they have learning resources that you can pay for. It's just brilliant. And they talk about heart breathing. So here Sandy is giving us a prime example of what we can do. And heart breathing is such a simple piece, okay? So you breathe more deeply than usual, and you imagine that the breath is coming in through the heart and out through the heart. And we might think, oh, that sounds really weird. Like, why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that because our heart brain has way more neurons than the brain in our head. And most of us don't know that. And that's okay. And this is where we get our information from, right? So when we activate our heart brain, right, we lose the scary image belief, the worst thing that can happen that comes from our brain and our head, that's really just trying to protect us from a saber-toothed tiger that's chasing us, but that just isn't happening anymore in our world, right? So now we move into, when we move into our heart brain, the fear leaves, everything else leaves, and you still have the emotion, you can actually hear people, you become coherent, and you're able to connect with the situation with wisdom, with clarity, and a regulated nervous system. And I realize that's a lot, but it's a snippet of how our physiology and understanding the opportunity that we have to be the best we can be in the moment, right? And then be able to not have the same potential for PTSIs, for operational stress injuries.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm just going to go back to a couple of things you said there, and I see there's some questions coming in on the chat too that I'll try and address, the last couple of ones. You talked about education, and immensely important, and you also talked about telling people what to do because you know from a physiological perspective what you should be doing, and maybe not have that lived experience yourself. And I think that's one thing in organizations that are trying to create a culture of support, is people have to share some stories when they feel comfortable in doing so, and share the successes as well. If you've gone through an OSI and you've come back and like things are good, and like we got to get away from the nemesis of PTSD is career ending, because it's not. People recover from PTSD, and you can go on to live a normal functioning life. But I'll tell you a little, I don't mean to be the storyteller, but I'll tell you a little story about education and really what I think is a failure. So I had come out of member support, and I was an inspector, district commander, and we had a horrible situation happen in the district, and I won't go into the details, but I had to lead the district, and quite frankly, I had to lead the organization through that situation. I was working through it all, and then I recognized my nervous system wasn't right. I was not regulated, and I needed to take a step back for a little bit. So I recognized that, which I thought was really good. I wasn't afraid to speak up about it. I took some time off, and I said, I knew what I was supposed to do. Eat right, get some sleep, get outside, get fresh air, get out in nature, exercise. I knew all those things that I had to do, as well as stay connected to people. So I biked at the time, had a road bike, and I'm like, I'm going to commit every day to go for a minimum of an hour road bike. So I'm into day 3, and day 1 and 2 didn't go so well. And day 3, I'm like, what is going on? I'm 20 minutes into my ride. My heart rate's nowhere near it should be for a max or even a decent workout. And all of a sudden I'm crying. I'm just breaking down. I can't focus on anything. It was actually dangerous for me to keep riding because thankfully I was on country roads, but I wasn't really paying attention to what was before me. So I'm frustrated. I'm not getting the exercise I want because I couldn't go as long, and I'm not focusing. And it wasn't until I came home and I started talking to somebody. I said, I don't get it. I'm doing everything right, but I don't seem to be improving. Like, I'm crying for no reason. And they're like, you're still in flight or fight. Your heart rate's recognizing when you get up to a certain level, and it's trying to protect you. And that's what's coming out. And I'm like, I just spent 4.5 years in member support. I walked people through all sorts of reactions. I told people what to do. I had no clue. And I felt like a failure, but that's how much education comes into understanding reactions, understanding what the normalcy is of wellness, and when you go off the beaten track of wellness, what could be impacted and going around. Like, I just saw that you asked the question of the impact of culture can have on the health of an organization and how to foster a culture of support. It's a really good question, because I think if we all had the magic wand, we would do that. And it doesn't happen overnight. I think a lot of it does come from leadership. You're embedding your training aspects, that you're not just doing the tactical, that you are focusing on the person and the wellness of the person. I can tell you here in Niagara that since I've left member support, I've been on promotional panels for sergeants and staff sergeants pretty well every year since. And I always say to people in their feedback, get to know what is hot in the organization right now. And wellness has been hot for a long time, and how to take care of your people. So one of our questions, since I've been on the panel for, I think, 4 or 5 years, is basically walk you through a scenario. It's obviously got some tactical pieces involved, but there's always a piece of how do you help your people and how do you support your people. And I would really like to think that our newly promoted sergeants and staff sergeants, it's embedded in them, because they're not just answering the question based on knowing I'm sitting in the room and that's what I want to hear. They're answering it with care, and they're actually thinking through some of the things they would do, thinking through some of the resources we have, and really thinking about the people they're leading. And like Michelle's been saying, it's leading with the heart. And I think when we get, and I can say this for myself, to a level of senior officers, sometimes you get tied up in the tactical and strategic decisions that we have to make every day. And I've even noticed in myself, I feel that I'm too far away from the members and too far away from that heart leadership. And I think you can't lose that. You can't lose that at any rank of your career.
I love that. And do you mind? I just want to challenge one little piece on that, and that's the language that we use. And you use the word failure, and it's how many times have we used that within ourselves? And I just don't think there is such thing as a failure. I think it's a learning experience every single time. And even when we're sharing our own stories and whatnot, when we use the word failure, people will focus on that and may even relate to that, and then maybe even connect. Oh my goodness. Whereas if we And so as leaders, as we share, as we train, interview, whatever we do, language is absolutely key in this. And I really loved your story. And thank you so much for sharing that story, Sandy. That's a really big piece in understanding the physiological perspective. And you really brought it home with that. And in the work that we do at the Haven is absolutely about that. It's teaching us to understand what's happening with us from a physiological perspective. And that's what the senior leadership is really appreciating from it, because they're able to notice, just like somebody did with you, not saying that it was a leader, just somebody said to you, no, you're in the freeze mode, or you're in the fight or flight, or whatever that happens to be. And this work in understanding our physiology it's not difficult. It's not complicated. You don't have to be a medical doctor to understand any of these pieces. It's simple physiology, and it's taught in a simple way so that we can recognize always first within ourselves, and then when we're looked after, can help support those around us and help educate those who may not have had that training, right? Oh, so we see somebody who, for whatever reason, some sort of actionable piece in the policing world, they froze in that moment, right? That's because they've hit a wall. That's a nervous system response. It's not a failure. They don't have a choice, and you don't have a choice. It's not about, were you courageous enough? Did you do this? All of these pieces, it's not at all about that, right? It's understanding what's happening physiologically to you, and you do not have a choice unless you're able to support the nervous system in returning to a healthy state again. And that's what we focus on. And I think organizations understanding those pieces in every single unit could really detach the judgment. It really makes us more objective and allows us to support those around us with from like, it's not your fault. This is just what's happening. This is what's happening as a result of your physiology. And this is what we can do to help you work through those pieces. And I think, Sandy, too, if as leaders, we were able to, when we go off on a leave, I was off on a 3-month leave myself, right? And, finding resources and understanding what to do and how to do it. Yes, our HR, I know at York Regional Police is and I've been away from them for 6 years now, but they had a fantastic, process where they help people and guide people, and that's all great. But when you're sitting at home alone, trying to understand what you can do, what resources are available, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had somebody, not maybe they do need to go home, maybe they don't, but giving the option and then having somebody lead them through exactly what might be going on and what resources they can access to support those pieces.
Yeah, thanks for the lecture, Michelle. I heard you. And you're absolutely right. It wasn't a failure, and the reason I looked at it as a failure is because I thought I knew so much more. But I think when it comes to education, especially with the physiological and the psychological mixed together, there's never a endpoint to stop learning. I also like the fact, like you're talking about programs, and I see another question. I'm not sure if you saw it. Can each of you provide a few examples of practices that the individual and the organization can engage in to promote health and wellness and well-being? There are so many now, and this isn't just for an organization for policing by any means or first responders. I think a lot of organizations can adapt to some of this. I'll walk through a few things that we're doing or have done, and then Michelle can come at it from a different perspective. One of the things we implemented very early on is we call them the NOWIs, and they're the new officer wellness evaluations. So 3 months after the officers come back from police college and they've hit the road, we bring them in to talk to one of our clinicians about what they do for stress, how they're adapting to shift work, how they're adapting to police work, what brings them stress, and they basically talk for an hour, and out of that, hopefully, they've got some better physical habits that they get into at an early age. And that we do it 3 times. So we do it at 3 months, 6 months, and a year. And not only does that new officer wellness piece hopefully gain culture for the new officers, it also sets them up with a relationship with one of our clinicians. So they feel comfortable in speaking to them because they've built that relationship, and they built it because it's mandated to start with. But after the hour, there's not many people that walk out of that office and say that wasn't beneficial for me. I think the other thing, and I know York was doing it at one time, I don't know if they're doing it still, but they have programs called the Healthy Apples program. And basically you get points, and I think the points add up to a prize at a certain time. Actually, I even think they give you time off, might be the prize at the end of the day. So you have to have a physical done, I believe optometrist, meet with a psychologist, and I want to say there's a fitness component in there as well. So they cover all the aspects, and what they're trying to do is encourage people to recognize what underlies a healthy lifestyle. So and thankfully this new generation, they want to be hooked up with the psychologist before the reactive something, like before they have to reach out and get help. They want to start with a norm. So I think that program, the Healthy Apples program, is fantastic. There's incentives there for time off, wellness time, whatever the case may be. It's a fantastic program. I know a lot of police services are engaged in what they call the safeguarding program, which until recently actually didn't have an accepted protocol. So most police services were doing whatever they thought was beneficial for their officers. But the biggest thing is, it's for selective units. Sorry for anybody that doesn't know. It actually started out with the intel world, because historically, and we're going way, way back, the intel world seemed to adapt to the world of what they were engaged in all the time. And I'm not saying everybody, but there was a higher threshold of people becoming involved in drugs or organized crime or drinking too much, whatever the case may be. So it started with intel. Now, ironically, we can't even touch our intel. That culture has not shifted for us. But our recon unit, our sexual assault, our child abuse unit, forensics units, all the units that are pretty much high exposure to trauma on a regular basis, which I'm going to argue every day that's it for a first responder, right? Like every day in today's world is your high exposure. But they're basically mandated to come in and sit down with, again, a clinician. They walk through some testing with them. They walk through the responses with them, and then they talk about coping. Some people have used it for an exit strategy to get out of the units. Some people have recognized during that time that they do need to seek further help. So that's what it's about. It's not about diagnosing. It's about safeguarding to make sure that you're still able to effectively manage your day-to-day jobs and the exposure hasn't got to you. And I think pretty much every service, at least across Ontario, is engaged in some form of that program. What else do we have? I mean, peer support, I think, is instrumental. Builds relationships, that staying connected piece, like especially when people go off work. If they're not thought of or they're disconnected, they become very bitter, which just adds to the physiological, the psychological, the potential return. Staying connected is huge. And peer support, if there's nobody else that's engaged, but peer support are trained people that they want to do that. Their passion of helping other people comes out in peer support. Chaplaincy, we have fantastic chaplains. Historically, again, chaplains were always believed to be the religious people. You had to be religious to speak to them. That's not what they are at all. They're spiritual caregivers, and they truly are. I know quite a few across the province, and I will admit I don't come from a religious background. Some of our own chaplains would probably be one of the first people I turn to in need. They're fantastic, and they're driven to do the work. They're trained. They're great. And then when you think of the physiological wellness, again, a lot of services have gone to that physical wellness person. So the person that can define trends, like in policing and every emergency service, sleep problems, diet problems because of shift work, time management problems, stress problems, family problems, like all that sort of stuff. They can identify trends and provide insight or even personal programs of what they need to be looking at to make sure that that's not a part of or an interruption in their career path. Some will be involved in the physical, like testing. Some will design fitness programs for people, arrange yoga. Like, there are so many opportunities out there to promote the health and well-being. I think the biggest part of it is you just got to hit the start button. And I can tell you, when we hit the start button here, especially for the psychological, I brought in a Let's Talk program. I'd already tapped some people on the shoulder to say, hey, can you help me out and share your story? Because I want to do this, but I don't think I'm going to get enough volunteers. The amount of people that wanted to share their story was unbelievable. I was overwhelmed. Like, I had to take a step back and make it a week program instead of a day. But the sharing the stories and people staying connected through those stories helps immensely to promote that culture within the organization.
Yeah, those are some really great resources. Sorry, I was gonna go ahead. Mike, would you like to say something?
I just want to make sure that the audience gets a chance to participate. I know there have been some chats thrown up on the chat section, but let's give the audience a chance to react. And of course, if there's
Mike, sorry, would you mind if I answered the question as well, since Sandy had a chance to do that? I just wouldn't mind sharing different resources that might be available. Is that okay before we jump into that piece?
Oh, please do.
Thank you. Okay, so there's a couple of things. And the reason that I think it's important is, yes, these are within organizations, but there are many things outside of organizations that are especially important. And I think many of us probably are aware of a lot of things that are happening within organizations. And that's why I think it's important to share this one piece. I think that we have some wonderful mental wellness organizations out there, some wonderful ones. And we've had some that, have been better than others. And for us, and I can only speak for the Haven because that's what we do, but we try to fill gaps so that we're supporting other organizations, because we really do believe that it's together we can, right? It's together. And for example, some of the things that we have at the Haven, we have what's called a critical incident virtual care unit, which is they are therapists that are trained in EMDR, but it's recent events protocol EMDR. And so basically, if one of your officers or a dispatcher is involved in a high stress call or whatnot, like a serious one where they're sent home, perhaps, they can, you don't even, it can be whatever you feel it is. It has, the EMDR protocol has to be conducted within 3 months of the incident itself in order to be effective, or else it's just regular EMDR. And what it does is it's had a high success rate of preventing post-traumatic stress injury moving forward. There's also equine assisted support. But I'm going to actually, I truly believe and have watched so many people who go through preventative, and it's an ongoing piece throughout, it's a fluid piece throughout our careers, preventative clinical programming that actually ends up being extremely therapeutic. So we've shifted those programs into clinical programming for people to be able to work through and learn what's going on with their physiology, and learn, how to keep themselves safe, how to work through the trauma that they're going through. It's quite powerful. Those pieces are, along with supporting organizations in the pieces that Sandy made. There are multiple programs that are available with this. And so I always say, just check out the resources that are available, and don't be afraid to ask around, I think is really important. So thanks, Mike, for that. I just wanted to add those pieces in. And one more thing I just want to add before is that that's a really, when one of your guests were asking, or maybe I think it was asking about, no, it was you actually, Mike, about asking how we can keep organizational culture and wellness healthy. Well, that begins with trust. And I think we can go on and talk about all these other pieces that we all know about. But I really think, it's important that we hit pieces that we don't talk about in webinars and things like that, right? So, trust is everything. And consistent leadership is what builds trust. Regulated nervous systems in a leadership perspective, from a leadership perspective, through a leadership lens, that's what builds trust. And it also builds sustainability in the organization, right? Because we're playing an infinite game, as I mentioned, right? We want to keep our people healthy and well. We have to have those pieces in place.
Michelle does get commission off of Simon Sinek.
Pardon me?
Yeah. Sandy, repeat that.
I just said Michelle doesn't get commission off of Simon Sinek.
Well, I'd like to give the audience a bit of time to digest some of the things that you've said, and offer an opportunity either for a comment or a question. But afterwards, I'd like to pick up on two things. One is trust and how to build trust in a practical way amongst our members. Because I think, as you pointed out, Michelle, trust in your organization is going to have a big effect on whether or not you're committed to doing the job as a public servant. So let's give the audience a chance to react. If there are any questions or comments, throw up your hand so I can recognize you. Dr. Anderson?
Yes, hi. I just got in about 15 minutes ago, and so I'm kind of catching up, but I did want to share an article about continuous improvement teaming and how that can be an organizational problem-solving nexus point where the team meets monthly to review issues that are unresolved and to propose solutions to management for decision-making. And so I attached an article about why that's so important at this time in history. And you're welcome to do anything with that article that you would like to do.
So perhaps picking up from an organizational perspective, Sandy, do you have a comment on the organization's responsibility to facilitate feedback from its members? And then Michelle, what about the individual's, responsibility to inform management on issues that are of concern to them?
Yeah, thanks for that. And Dr. Anderson, I'm actually really interested in reading that article and hopefully leaving it with some people that we can implement some change. We, like every other service, engage with surveys on a regular basis, wellness surveys. Unfortunately, we've also come out of them with some workplace issues beyond the wellness, but definitely contribute to wellness that we're engaged in a project with right now. I know that our clinician or our manager of member support right now, if anything's on the horizon that really needs to be aware or management needs to be aware of that they're not, they will bring it to our attention and see what we can resolve from it. I can speak to, I've had enough of budget, but everybody knows that budget's an issue. But one of our units was extremely short-staffed last year. Every single one of them was experiencing burnout, and they were a part of our safeguarding program as well. And the clinician came to management and said, these guys cannot continue the way they are currently operating. You need to put more bodies in there. They're burnt out. We were at a high threshold of call outs for them. Just no work-life balance whatsoever. They were passionate about what they do, but in the end, that passion can't override their health. So management responded. They were our first priority to ensure we got staffing this year. And in a perfect world, I think that's what has to work without exposing confidential issues or confidential situations on a one-on-one piece. But when you've got a group like that and something comes to the forefront, it needs to go to management so management can react. And quite frequently, and I have a new respect for this saying, is management can't respond to something they don't know about. And they think we know everything. We don't, because unfortunately we're so engaged in our own roles that we're not hearing the global picture of the organization on a daily basis. So I agree. I think there has to be an open door policy. I would like to think we have one, with permission of the people that we can come forward with.
Yes, Sandy, I would like to let you know that there is an assessment, online assessment, that's being developed right now for police. And it's been developed by a doctor, and I've been working with him for 25 years and have referred probably 200 police officers to him, and I've watched what happened over time. He's kept track of all of the interventions that he did, over 2,500 of them in 25 years. And now he's building a self-assessment that officers can do. And he's developed it so that it's a bit complex. So I'm coaching him to not dumb it down, but to scale it down so that it's fast and so that it's crystal clear. Officers can do it in about 5 minutes to get a DSM-based mental health assessment that they can send to their doctor or to their psychologist that's validated. So this is precious information for the doctors who are going to be treating various officers. And it's precious information for the officers because then they can self-monitor their own mental health state of affairs in a valid way, that then they can have a consultation with their physician or their psychologist.
I love hearing of things that are coming down the pipe. That is so encouraging. I think you shared that in the chat too, but if you have any more information, more than willing to take a look at that and pass it on as well. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm just helping him to create a briefer, faster version of it. You can do it yourself on the website, so you get a sense of what it's like and what kind of information comes out of it. It's something that doesn't take that long. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes to do the assessment, but I want it to take 3 minutes because I know cops.
Yeah, you do.
Michelle, perhaps you can respond as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for that, Terry. It sounds like some really incredibly valuable information that I will absolutely be looking into as well. I think from an individual level, if I remember the question correctly, I've got a great memory and it's short. I believe that from an individual level, I think what we need to teach our people is, and I'm going to go back to the same concepts because it's really that simple. It's understanding what our circle of safety is. Because if I feel safe, or I can regulate my nervous system and feel safe, then I can share with the organization, right, what's going on. But I can't do that if I don't feel safe. So it really, this is why I emphasize the safety, physiology, and sustainability, because all the measures in the world aren't going to help us, and they are very, very helpful and very much needed, by the way. But we also have to understand that what we need to do in order to be able to, number one, answer them properly so that we're really hearing what's going on within ourselves so that they are effective for us, and then being able to translate those pieces with the organization. And then the other piece that I realize this is you've asked me from an individual level, but I have to be able to, as I just said before we got into this aspect of it, trust, right, that the organization is going to look after me and hold my safe in a space, respect my circle of safety, right? And so, yes, that's an individual piece, yes. But at the end of the day, unless I know how to regulate myself from a physiological perspective, and unless I know what my circle of safety is, I will not have the ability, not because I'm angry or whatever else, I won't have the ability I will not have the ability to be able to share what is going on with the organization so that they can help me effectively. And it's not their fault, unfortunately. It's collection of responsibility, really.
Thanks, Michelle. I noticed that Dr. McNaughton had either a question or a comment. Nancy, if you want to chime in, please.
I'm laughing here. So I so agree with you. I'm sitting here. I'm just getting over a cold. I so agree with both of you, and I thank you so much for bringing such emphasis and focus to this area. It's really important. My colleague and I, Carrie, and I have been working in the area of relational policing, relational trust-based communication, which I think it would be lovely if you, like, you're both nodding, if you have anything to say about that. My other thing that I said off the top was there is more of an interest now in thinking about, in the psychiatry world for sure, that mental health is physical health.
Yes.
Like there is no separation between, if you're mentally not well, then you're physically not well. So there's not like, and we can't stop thinking about them as two separate things, right? So physiology is mental health. Mental health is part of it. It's just, I just wanted to, because I find it really still a challenge to not separate them, right? We're just so used to separating them. Anyway, so if you have anything to say about relational policing, trust,
I think the easiest thing to say about trust is it's hard to build, both internally and externally, and very easy to lose. I've always, and we all know the horror stories in the policing profession of people that shouldn't be trusted and became police officers. I think there's a lot of research to be done in our recruiting aspect and what the psychological assessment of recruiting looks like. And I believe there is some movement on that recently. But it's got to be trust in yourself too. And I forget who said it early on, but I honestly, like, when I look back, people trusted me in member support and trusted me with stuff that I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, how, like, I was honored, but at the same time, I'm like, how did I get to this stage? And when I look at my career, and I'm going to go to the professional standards route, where basically that's not a trusted environment in policing. I think it's how I treated people when I was in there that I had to deal with. And I gained trust from a negative interaction on their perspective. My integrity means everything to me. And I've even said, at the end of the day, when I walk out of this profession, I know I can look at myself in the face and in the mirror and say, you left with integrity, because it means everything to me. And I think it truly starts from within.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, beautifully said. And thank you, Dr. McNaughton, for bringing that up. It's really, 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 I didn't even think of it. And it's so true, right? We are used to the division between mental health and physiology, and there is none. And that's what I've been trying to say the whole time. And you've just said it beautifully for me. So thank you for that. And yeah, I think, again, relational policing I think it's so important. It's absolutely key for us to, again, understand how we communicate from a physiological perspective. I know I keep hammering this home, but again, it's what people are now understanding, right? That communication is physiological. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but if any of you are aware of heart math and your electromagnetic field, okay, like I said, I'm a big nerd, forgive me for this, but heart math teaches that your electromagnetic field, which extends about 8 feet in front of you, right, contains emotional data. So if you haven't cleaned up that emotional data, right, it's contagious. And it's contagious with others around you. So when we think of relational policing, right, whether it's with people, like whether it's with our own colleagues or whether we're attending calls or whatever we're doing, right? If we have the opportunity to do that heart breathing for a few minutes, or not even a few minutes, actually it's like seconds, it's like 30 seconds is enough, we're able to regulate, right? And then we're able to make sure that we're using the heart brain, as we understand it, is the wisdom and clarity piece. And then we're going in, understanding where we're at, so that if all of a sudden, and this is kind of an interesting piece, the contagion of, if, let's just say we go into a meeting, it's a pretty intense meeting, right, with some of our supervisors, we've messed up, whatever, but we regulate ourselves, we go into that room, and all of a sudden I feel a hit of, ish, Well, that's their electromagnetic fields intermingling with ours. And again, if we have this information when we're dealing with relational policing, we're able to just be more effective. Then, as Sandy explains, the burnout rates will go down because, again, we understand. We understand, and our people understand how far they can go, and all of those pieces. So I'm good with that. But sorry, thanks for that, Dr. McNaughton. That was a great question.
So if I could pick up a bit of a theme on behalf of the audience, Michelle, you talk about relational policing, and I expect that that also includes relationships with peers. Can we talk a little bit about peer support? We have talked about organizational support, and we've talked about the individual's willingness to either accept that support or ask for that support. But what about peer support in the workplace? Have you got a comment or two about that?
Yeah, if you're asking, I sure do. I think there's nothing greater than the power of peers. And yet there's nothing more detrimental than the power of peers. It can go either way. And I know peer support teams that are filled with people who are popular or are hand chosen, but not because of their ability. And Sandy brings up an incredibly wonderful piece just naturally. She explained that, people came in and they just trusted me. Like, I had that experience with her as well, because she's a peer that gives off, again, from a physiological perspective, because it's all physiology, right? That's what she does. And so here, I think peer support is great when people are in a space that they can support from that perspective. So I think you really have to be careful with those pieces as well. At the Haven, it's all peer-led because we firmly believe in peer support. It's how do we share experiences and share educational pieces with each other, training with each other, if we don't truly understand what's going on in our worlds. So I think peer support is absolutely key, and stats have shown it. It's high statistics in relation to the power of peer support.
Sandy, any comments?
Yeah, the only thing I really like that I liked it all, but Michelle said there, it's very important too that there's a time and a place for peer support, and it's imperative for that relationship, that connection, the sharing of information. But when somebody's in crisis, it's also the nexus to get them professional help. You can be there and standing beside them as a peer, but none of our peer support teams are trained to the level of being able to help at that capacity, other than like post-crisis incident and stuff. But like, if somebody's needs to be regulated over a long term, peer is good to walk through it with them, but they're not the end result.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you prepare peers to intervene then. If one of the expectations is that the peers will be a support network, I think one of the obligations is to intervene even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, actually. Like, obviously, I know when we first designed our peer support program here, we actually had people nominate people, and it stayed away from exactly what was said about the popularity contrast, because it was usually somebody that had already had an interaction with another peer that had helped them through something or been supportive through a piece. Then obviously come in for an interview and engage in appropriate training. I remember touching the subject of suicide with the peers, and like, it has to be reported. Like, we had a policy with the hospital that would keep them private and whatnot. And a lot of peers really stepped back and said, I wouldn't do that. And I said, would you rather be the one on the other side after somebody has committed suicide and wondering what you should have done? And especially in the policing environment, it's a very wobbly area. But I think once you engage in that philosophy of there's a time and a place that you might have to make the extra step for somebody in crisis, that's the expectation to me of a peer, is walking beside them through everything they're going through. And whether that's a day-to-day, just having some stress today, or I'm in crisis and I've got some really dark thoughts and I need severe help. You don't have to be the be all and the end all for that help in the end, but you can walk beside them as they go through it.
Do you mind if I jump in there as well with this? Because Sandy's made some really great points that I just want to expand upon. And I think ensuring that peers are trained, like, I find it very interesting looking back, in fairness, right? A lot of this education that I'm talking about right now is new. I've taken it, it's new, it's fresh, and it really wasn't as understood before. And I think if I were to talk about peer support, I would talk about the training that they receive, ensuring that they receive the training that I've talked about, you know, the safety, the understanding of these pieces, all, and how they work together. Because when we understand how communication works, again, another little interesting piece from Dr. James R. Dotty, Mind Magic, incredibly powerful book. And he explains that the middle ear, which actually hears, and it allows you to be empathetic when you're hearing, when you're listening, and it's basically hearing the nonverbal communication pieces, right? Your middle ear does not hear those pieces if you don't feel safe, if you are not in a safe space. So if, let's just say I'm a peer and I'm talking with, or I'm here as a supportive peer, and this person says something and I'm triggered all of a sudden, and we're human beings, I'm sorry, but all of a sudden I'm no longer listening, right? And I might miss something really important, like the intention to die by suicide or anything like that, right? And so again, I think training, I can't emphasize that enough, in all levels, in every area, starting with, like, from our candidates up to our governance. Really important.
Thanks, Michelle. We're getting now close to the conclusion, so I'd like to offer you both an opportunity to talk about the value of both mental and physical well-being supports in the workplace, and again, both from the organizational and the individual level. And I invite either one of you to start the conversation. So we're talking about the value of investing in these initiatives.
Michelle will finish with the whole physiological doctor level stuff. I'll go from a lower level. I honestly don't think you can place a value on it. And I think that's very evident when you see every service now investing in it, because it's accessible, it's within the organization, it's amongst people that understand what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully, in the best practices, it can be a conduit to making something better if it's an organizational blip. Like I said, when I was in member support, I started it on my own. That unit will never stop growing. And it's going to grow in the physical and the psychological capacity, and hopefully be a wholesome provider of wellness. But it's not stopping. This isn't just a trend. This is something that needs a lot of attention. And to me, there was a stigma if you had it inside. Oh, I don't want to see anybody inside. People are going to know that I'm looking for people. That's been erased for the most part. And I think having something accessible, especially in times of crisis or in times of what people perceive to be their personal crisis, having it right within the organization just makes it so much more efficient and understanding. Like I said, I know Michelle's going to speak to it from a higher level, but the value, you can't put a value on people's lives. And I honestly think having it internally also helps people stay engaged within the organization.
Yeah, beautifully said, Sandy. I really, and it's not a higher level, it's just a shared level. Yes, so no, we cannot put a value on the importance and again, understanding that it's training. And I'm going to go just through quickly the little points that we've been adding through just to wrap this up with this point. So again, understanding and making sure that all of our leaders and every single person who comes into the organization or is even thinking of coming into the organization, understanding that physiology is foundational, right? It's foundational. So having these pieces, understanding that trust begins inside the organization. And yet it also begins with each and every one of us. And this all contributes to the value and importance, right, that we place on making sure that we have these tools. That leadership, it's not a rank, it's a responsibility, right? Leadership is not managing people. And we mix that up, right? Leadership is having the honor of caring for the people that are working with you. That's what leaders do. Leaders look after their people, right? That we're integrating pieces. We're not adding more pieces. We're not adding another program or adding this. We're integrating pieces into the work that we have. Niagara Regional Police, you have a phenomenal array of programs. Sandy helped me with my, she was phenomenal. They helped with my PhD, with my dissertation, because I did the reintegration program, Edmonton Police's reintegration program. I brought that into York Regional Police, and she was phenomenal in that. And integrating those programs that we know are filling gaps that exist, not just to, make it look like something's happening. Another quick example of integrating is, we do annual requalification. Okay, we do our firearms, we do our defensive tactics. Now it may have changed, I don't know, but that when I left, okay, there we go. Sandy's agreeing with me on that, and so what do we do in relation to the cultural health of our organization, understanding that it's physiology? This is a great opportunity where we can train our people in understanding that piece. I was sharing a story, we can, instead of doing scenarios with just with firearms, we can integrate, hey, I'm doing a door-to-door with my colleague here, and my colleague says, oh, guess what? So-and-so is off again, Dr. Summeroff. Well, we need to teach people, educate people on how they can dissolve that kind of an interaction rather than perpetuating it and toxifying the culture. My response to that would be, oh, really? Oh my gosh, they're off again. I'm so sorry to hear that. You know what? I'm going to check in on them. A simple exercise like that supports how we can turn a potentially toxic situation into a healthy, solution-focused, collaborative togetherness piece, right? And then, of course, our sustainability over survival. And Sandy, I just love this. She came up with this, from survival to thriving. And I just that was whoa, I love that. And every organization should be focused on that. How many of our organizations, with the levels of burnout and everything else that is going on, are people who are off on leaves, right? I know Toronto has over 900 people, Toronto Police, right? Because our chair for the Haven, Lisa Ruaco, is an incredibly wonderful human being, TAC member or whatever else, the only female sniper. Anyway, she's huge into this mental wellness. And she was saying it's just unbelievable, the people that are off right now, right? So having it so that our people are trained and supported from trained leadership so that we can be sustainable, right? And it begins on day one, right? It begins on day one. So to me, that's the value, the importance of the value. Otherwise, we're going to lose our people. We already are. And how can we change that, right?
Thanks, Michelle. Any reaction from the audience on that? Okay. Well, I'd like to give you both an opportunity to make some concluding remarks, and then a final word or two about the coalition's support for your efforts. So either one of you can start.
Go ahead, Sandy.
First, I'd like to thank the coalition and Michelle, because I think your connection brought me into this, for having the opportunity to discuss this with everybody and whoever might be viewing it later. It's actually rejuvenated me, and as I'm entering my retirement stages, I know there's pieces of work in the wellness area that still can be done from outside the organization. I was intentional about that. I've said that to the people in member support, because there's always going to be work to do, and if there's any sort of connection or trust pieces, I think I can help bridge that connection. If there's organizations out there that aren't in the wellness era yet, you got to start. And it doesn't matter how small you start, you got to start. I said from the get-go of our program, if you build it, they will come. What we didn't understand is how many will come and how quickly. It was overwhelming, to be quite honest, but you got to build it, and it's the right thing to do for your members for overall wellness. It keeps, I mean, I don't want to talk about money, but it keeps people in the workplace. It keeps them focused. It keeps them motivated and driven to do what they signed up to do.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Sandy. I mean, and I concur with what Sandy said. First of all, it's an honor that Sandy, for joining us. I know today I'm so happy to hear you. We could have this fun together today, and I'm so appreciative of the coalition for allowing us to share our thoughts and whatnot. And I think what you said is really beautiful, and I'm just going to expand upon that. Is just like you said, if you build it, they will come. And I know I can only speak for the Haven because I know it intimately, but we're a charitable organization. We're not out for the money. We're not out for any of that. We're here to support where support is needed. And you'd be blown away by the incredibly wonderful programming that we have to offer. And I think really when we're reminded that, you know, the integration of our physiology, right? Trusted leadership and purpose from the beginning. With those pieces, we don't build officers, we build healthier humans, right? Who can sustain meaningful careers and serve their communities with strength and compassion. And that changes everything. And the reason that that's so important is then from a budgetary perspective, I would rather see us spend our money on training than on trying to support people who had to be off because we didn't catch them ahead of time, right? To have to replace them with trained officers that cost us so much money. If we want to look at the financial piece, it's the training that is key. So again, thanks again for everything. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity.
Well, thank you both. Well, I think as overall concluding remarks, I don't think there's any dispute that you cannot overstate the importance of individual members' well-being and the health of the organization. And then the consequence of that, of course, is a healthy organization can better serve its community, which is, of course, our goal. Our two speakers today have offered both passionate and practical insights into issues that affect members' well-being and organizational health, and have made steps, practical steps that I think from which we can learn to actually create a healthier environment and healthier individuals. And as I said, the coalition will post the connections on its webpage, and I encourage the audience members to follow up. In addition, this webinar will be featured on the coalition's YouTube. So if you want to follow up or check on something that was said previously, you're welcome to do so. We'll have that posted up in due course. Also, I think it's an opportunity for me to promote the coalition as a source of both information and innovation in the area of policing. And Michelle, I'll make a comment about a remark you made very early on at the start. Preparing people for a career in policing before they even join. And so for those in the audience who might not be aware, the coalition has undertaken to initiate what we're calling the National Center of Police Excellence. It would be a national center, a research center that would create curriculum, post-secondary school curriculum, for those who are interested in becoming police officers or members of police services before they actually make attempts to join. And there would be an opportunity in that course of study to introduce organizational health and member well-being, a point that I think, Michelle, you were making right at the very beginning, preparing people before they even enter into the recruiting process to think about these things, both for their own health and well-being, but also to advance the goals of the organization and ultimately better serve the community. So I encourage the audience members to visit the Coalition's webpage to learn more about this initiative, to create a national center where a curriculum can be developed that would be delivered by post-secondary school institutions to people who are interested in joining policing, and prepare the candidate long before they enter into the recruiting process for a life in policing, if that's what they choose to do. Well, I can't express our gratitude enough to our two speakers who obviously, as I said, speak passionately and with commitment and practically about organizational health and well-being. So I want to thank you. I'm seeing lots of, clapping hand emojis coming across the screen. So I think it's a universally shared feeling. I welcome audience and Michelle and Sandy to promote your activities by just letting the Coalition know what you're up to. And we'll make sure, to the extent that we can penetrate into the community, we'll do so in your behalf, and find an opportunity for mutual support. And wish you the very best in your future endeavors. And Sandy, it's a big decision to make, to retire, but you're going to find that you are not idle. Resources like you in the community are way too valuable, and you can expect phone calls almost immediately. And I'm grateful that you've given the community a warning that you're thinking about retiring, because that'll prepare them to ask you for support. So good for you. Thank you both for your public service. And unless there's a comment from the audience, I'm prepared to give you the rest of the day